Hey everyone, this video is a response to Gura. The points I'm going to be making have to do with what he said on maturity and important clarifications. I'll say this as concise as possible so you all can follow. He said to be mature is to take on responsibility. So when I was thinking about this, I thought immediately, but this doesn't factor in the troubles in systemic thinking. He mentioned not taking ownership over situations. That attitude is a cop-out mentality of the typical capitalist who wants to put equal footing onto everybody to justify why they themselves made their money and can ignore the fact that others did not, meaning it has nothing to do with maturity. The next thing is a mature person doesn't wait until they run out of money. They plan ahead. Okay, it sounds reasonable, but this doesn't factor in the spontaneity facet to human psychology. That's necessary for vast numbers of people, meaning the way many people have to navigate intellectually, psychologically, is specifically that way through spontaneity, which means they can't follow the protocol that he thinks is necessary for people to be mature. So instead of saying, oh, people function differently, he labels those people as immature, and therefore different, and therefore separate from the rest of society and separate from the ideal, which creates segregation. So he has a segregative mindset without realizing it. Next thing he says is worth ethic is about not expecting shortcuts. Just a clarification, there are many points that I kind of agreed with or I didn't feel were worth mentioning, so I didn't mention them and I didn't scrutinize them so thoroughly. But I'm mentioning what I felt was worthwhile to scrutinize to a much higher level than other things. Work ethic is not expecting shortcuts. So the problem with his mentality here is that he doesn't factor in the needs of the person and how much money is necessary for them to survive well in society and to feel comfortable in their body, which everyone has the right to do. So if you listen to that section, it should be in the towards the beginning. You'll see what I mean if you frame it in that way. The next thing is immaturity is to be lost in your own emotions, unable to act deliberately, consistently, and peacefully. The problem with this approach is that it doesn't factor in that the person's emotions are chaotic, because he used that word, based on how much they can fit into society and hence get their needs fulfilled. The assumption he has is the troubled outlook that most of society has, that if you acted this way, you would somehow get your needs met, meaning if you force yourself to be a particular way, despite fulfilling the action forcibly as a very strong component to our mass needs for medications. That's an aspect that needs to be delved into, why people don't realize that it's forcing us to fit in and act a specific way, which is causing us to have our mental illnesses. The fifth thing I want to talk about was he said immature people are easily offended, 23 minutes in. Once again, he makes an assumption that in all cases of getting easily offended, it's because they are immature, not factoring in chronic needs that are lacking that cause them to feel easily offended. For example, if you lack friends, you'll put emphasis onto each friendship more likely. You will value it, you'll be attached to it. So Leo's response would probably be, don't be attached to friendship. Very vague and really impractical. But his solution is to kind of bypass the facts here. The fact is he's not getting friends, and it's not his fault. So according to his generalization, which is the flow of his words, he will say the responsibility is on you in all circumstances, regardless of your situation and personal needs. Meaning Leo is focused on general advice and ignores the individual's needs, or the individual needs of the masses, which usually overlaps with not fixing systemic problems. The immature person does not have epistemic humility, he says, in 34 minutes in and 33 seconds. You are not one who lacks epistemic humility if you had first-hand experience of a variety of things. Sometimes I think he might not realize this, meaning if you believe in the animistic world of archetypes, epistemic humility is to believe that maybe neither paradigm is more evolved than the other. But in many instances, people are saying, no, the animistic is lower down and previous and undeveloped, while the concrete formulations and categorizations are more evolved and a better formulation, a better construct. of ideas, for understanding these ideas, a better map to use, or a better ink to use for the map, however you want to understand it. The immature person does not have epistemic humility. We covered that. Respecting sovereignty is not trying to control others. What Leo fails to realize is that our society is set up so that if you don't manipulate in some fashion, you will not get anywhere. And more than that, we have to manipulate in a way that doesn't get considered manipulation. Therefore, Therefore, the alternative for dominance has become subtle manipulation. Not complete outright, but subtle. And that's our capitalistic framework. In spiral dynamics, you would call this stage red light or stage orange, which many people understand that red is simply infused into the orange mentality. And it's not developed or evolved or moral. 58 minutes in, he doesn't factor in that OCD is from chronic needs not getting met. Okay? So people with OCD, instead of saying, oh, you have to get over your OCDs, you have to say, oh, he has an OCD that's not getting met for a specific reason. So you have to change the system so you understand individual needs as important, which he doesn't seem to be able to do. 105, Leo paradoxically acknowledges that the immature person is deficient in love, yet with that knowledge still puts the responsibility onto them to receive their needs. This is a fundamental problem with Leo's perception. So you can pause that, re-listen to it, and analyze that fundamental issue with Leo's perception. 1 hour and 15 minutes in, he considers a person's problems mutually exclusive with money and fails to make the connection between money and positive relationships. I'm not saying they automatically improve relationships. Rather, it's the oil running the engine of every single relationship on earth. And the ability, this is even more important, for a woman to feel confident to propose the notion in her head, even subtly or subconsciously, that a relationship is worth pursuing, which teaches you that the attraction is mostly based on whether or not her subconscious believes she'll be able to survive in that relationship. But because of his outlook, he's not capable of doing this, seeing it in this way. 1 hour and 16 minutes in, the war that takes place within a person's self mainly happens when their needs are not taken care of. So where he focuses on the definition of mature, he fails to realize it's a matter of fulfilling needs and not related to an undeveloped mind. Right. So this is a repetitive facet with him. Those infused into the capitalistic framework, this is my thesis, and I think it's self-evident once you see the evidence and you see how people think in general. Not just him, he just happens to be a popular YouTuber at this point. Those infused in, who's very knowledgeable in all kinds of subjects, those infused into the capitalistic framework and how they make their money find it near impossible to see this on a regular basis. Peace is the fruit of a mature life, a quote from him. Okay, this comes in with the assumption that a person's needs and being in a peaceful state are entirely mutually exclusive. Meaning his definition of maturity is, as a default, you are always in a peaceful state. Which for those who have a basic knowledge of how needs work, know that to be false. A false formulation. This is at 1 hour and 18 minutes in if you want to check it. At 1 hour, 21 minutes, there's a difference between leeching. He talks about leeching. Okay, so I want to reiterate. There's a difference between leeching onto someone and feeling like a leech. Okay? Just because you feel like a leech, it doesn't make you one. If a person is struggling to make money, that doesn't make him or her a leech for accepting the help of others, even if it looks that way from the public eye view. And that's a really insulting thing to say by anyone, and those who have said it should be ashamed of themselves. 1 hour and 22 minutes in and 12 seconds, if you complain for the sake of clarity, that is a form of action. Leo does not factor that in. Meaning, don't say it's bad to complain. Rather, follow up your complaint with an action understanding it carried the purpose of bringing yourself some clarity. Sometimes complaining is the only way to convey how, and the second aspect is sometimes it's the only way to convey how you feel about something. Our society encourages being inauthentic, holding stuff in and not showing what, So this is a rampant philosophy that is intolerant of complainers and presumes they are simply negative people. Our society also has the assumption that those who complain are pessimists, irregardless of their situations or psychological needs. This is because the society as a whole does not want to view things as if things aren't people's faults. 1 hour and 22 minutes and 22 seconds. To take action in the political realm is a lot more complicated than anyone knows, because the organized methods work in a predictable way, meant to integrate the person with other like-minded people, but not to necessarily make drastic changes for the better in the short term. Therefore, methodical steps are useful if your vote counts, so to speak. Example, a famous person who says who he's voting for or she's voting for. Okay. 1 hour and 32 minutes in, 19 seconds. He's right that name calling is an issue, but finding foundational problems is often deemed a blame game, and that you are throwing off responsibility by considering something as an issue. This is improper. So the idea that one of the issues with Leo is when it comes to foundational issues, he can't really pinpoint them, because if he does that too much, the system itself will feed back a system that registers in people's minds that he's trying to break the system that provides them with their income. So he has limitations on how much criticism he can give. But that causes him to be kind of in this bind where he can't criticize too much. He has to have a kind of balance. And it's not that he has to have that balance, is that he's not aware of this concept enough to know how to overcome it. I'm not giving him permission to not overcome this. I'm not saying like, oh, it's okay because of you have such a big following, you need to say things. I'm not giving you permission. You should realize that the foundational issues are most important, and getting to them is the most important thing. And there's always deeper levels of foundation, and if you say you can't play the blame game, then you're going to believe that me pointing out foundational issues is part of the blame game. And then you're not going to maximize on your stage yellow and spiral dynamics by fixing improper or unhelpful systems to the masses and individuals simultaneously. Okay, let me finish what I wrote here. He's right that you should not pursue, 132.32. He's right that you should not pursue pleasure in excess. Okay? He talks about getting addicted to pleasures, and mature people are not addicted to these things. It's not, it doesn't make up they're not pursuing it all the time. Right? But he does not seem to realize that addiction is sprouted from a lack of specific needs. Once again, this idea that if you had what you needed, you wouldn't be trying to compensate with these things. So this, and when you don't have those needs, this craving gets seeded into the psyche and causes abnormalities or OCDs about having those things, whatever it is. Sometimes you can't even list examples because people are going to point and laugh. You couldn't get that. I got that when I was like 10. I couldn't get that. I got that when I was 25. And so it's better not to give examples in this case. Once again, as a philosophy on people in life, Leo does not view a person's situation as an answer or in general, as a reason to explain where someone is in his life. Specifically because by doing so, it would contradict his theses regarding success and development. And remember, he has a whole brand on development, and life purpose, which coincides with that. And one of the last points is, on 135, the vague advice of become self-reliant is not very helpful and ignores the truth about most people's situations being a matter of luck. I wrote some notes here. I just want to see if it's appropriate for the video. Oh, discernment is realizing that money is not a higher value. So I want to make a point on something he doesn't realize about money. What he doesn't realize is that when he says that at 16 minutes in, is that he doesn't realize that it's the oil for the engine of every relationship and every facet of investments of oligarchical connections. So we do have an oligarchy, not just in America, it crosses the whole world. It's been this way for over 100 years and maybe even further. connections in our society, and by extension, the whole world. Meaning, because to do anything, you need money, including to support and sustain positive endeavors. It becomes, sadly, of course, a higher value. So money is a higher value in the sense that money is going to help you have a relationship and help you give charity and help you build infrastructure to help people. Because it's so intertwined with doing good and being someone to have the capacity to do so, it does become a higher value. But his framing of it's not a higher value misses the point that there's a whole systemic issue that's causing people to require. First of all, he's not realizing that it is a higher value, but it forces people to require it as a higher value. And that in turn causes people to go down the rabbit hole of pursuing it and become even entirely unconscious with the belief system that they need money without ever pursuing higher values with it. But these same people refuse to acknowledge that this facet, since it puts a 180 on this cliche idea that money is important for our society. I wrote down what ways I feel like a child. That's personal and stuff that I'm working on, but I don't think it's terrible. It's just, I have Zelda. I play Zelda on Nintendo Switch. There are things that I play hours, but it's a normal thing, and that doesn't need to be mentioned in the video. I did his little workshops that he suggested. So that's the video. That's my response. That's my criticism. They're foundational criticisms. They go to the bottom of his philosophies, and it interconnects with entire systemic problems of our core philosophies as a nation and even planet by extension. So it's worthwhile thinking about these ideas. Have a good day.